How you guys doing? Hey, I just want to thank all the people in here when he said, if it bleeds, we can kill it. Anybody who applauded, you are my friend. You were invited to the cookout. I appreciate you. We don't have well, actually, we have a good bit of time, but nobody's here to hear me talk. So I want to introduce much of the crew and a very particular member of the cast of Prey. First, we have creature designer Alec Gillis. Please come on. The film's editor, Angela Catanzaro. Its cinematographer, Jeff Cutter. Producer, Jenny Myers. Lead actress, Amber Midthunder. And the film's incredibly talented director, Dan Trachtenberg. So Dan, how in the hell did this awesome-ass film come to be?
I was very inspired by Mad Max Fury Road when it came out, and particularly because it was a movie that told its story almost primarily through action. And I love the idea of also making something like that, but wondered if I could potentially make it not just a visceral experience, but an emotional one as well. So thought, well, maybe if we take the engine of an underdog story, of a sports movie, and fuse that with the action genre, then maybe it would really be a very stirring, rousing, moving experience. And thinking of an underdog movie, I started thinking about, well, what if the protagonist was from a culture that is also underrepresented, and Native American and particularly Comanche have been very slighted by Hollywood and are often relegated to playing the sidekick or the villain and never really the hero. And I think, I was just thinking about this today, like I'm actually very inspired by video games as much as movies in my formative years, and video games offer a very experiential, rather than passive experience that movies are, and I'm always thinking about how can a movie feel more experiential. And so there was something about linking, like you're rooting for a character and you're also rooting for an actor at the same time. Like the audience gets a very special, more experiential time, at the movies.
There have been a lot of movies made about the Predator. I think this one is very distinct, and you kind of got at it right away, which was there's a cultural dynamic to this film that I think maybe the other films in the series either lack or don't address in the way that this film does. Jane, you're one of the producers on the film, and you're also a descendant, you're a member of the Comanche Nation. Just talk to me about working with Dan and building the film and making sure that that cultural sort of dynamic, the gravitas of it, could play hand in hand with the genre elements of a Predator universe.
Absolutely, it's about time, I think. So we've never had, not even a short film, any type of film in our Comanche language. So for us, it just kind of gave us a whole different dimension, because as a Comanche, in movies, people see us ride in, we kill everything, we take what we want, we burn everything, and we ride back out. So, they don't see us as a people. But in this film, the way that it's written, it really embraces our culture. And luckily, Dan picked me to work on this with him, and so I got to add some of my things, that happened, when I was a young woman, but also some cultural things that we had, and then also maybe a little few made up things. But still, it's amazing to just, see that, because our whole Comanche people, were, when they saw it, they were so excited, because they said, you brought us into reality. This brought us as real people. And people now see us that, and so they've always been saying, now they see us.
Amber, what is it like to step into the footsteps of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny Glover, I must say. Danny Glover did a good job part of it too. When you got the script, when you got the call, when you first had your first conversation with Dan, what went through your mind, and what did you try to bring to this role?
Those are all very different things that happen. This did not happen at the same time. My first conversation with Dan was over a year, I think, before I even knew that this was a Predator film. So really all that I knew was kind of this character, and I knew that there was a movie being made by 20th Studios that was about a young Comanche woman And I was very confused because studios normally don't really want anything to do with Native people in, you know, time period movies, so I was very confused about that, a little suspicious. But it was really cool, and it was a really cool character, and I really connected with it right away. And there's this kind of thing that happens to me, I think, with characters where there's like this kind of special, magical ingredient that you can't make happen, it just happens. And sometimes I think no matter how much or how little I have a script or information about it, I call it like the Iron Man suit. It just kind of is something that clicks in, and it just fits in a way that I can't describe. And that was kind of the experience that I had with this, and then it was the same experience meeting Dan. We did like a callback over Skype or something, and just talking.
Pre-pandemic, so it was Skype.
We were ahead of the curve.
No Zoom then.
But you know, I mean, that was just, I think it just felt right away. I mean, especially at the test when, you know, when we finally got to meet in person and do this. We did a scene in Comanche, we did all of our scenes in English, we did them in Comanche, and then we had a really cool moment where Dan came up to me at the first scene and he was like, listen, I have an idea and it might be really awful, which immediately I'm excited by that kind of a thing. I'm like, okay, cool, what are we doing? And he was like, it might be weird, if it doesn't work, that's fine, but just, I want you to do the whole scene, but don't do any of the dialogue. But do everything, but don't say a word. And I was like, okay, cool. And I asked a couple questions, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. And I did it, and he came back, and he didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and we just kind of looked at each other, and we both kind of nodded, and I think that was where like we don't have to talk to each other a lot, we just have like I don't think that, yeah, I know, it's, okay, cool. And that was where that started. And so for me, it just, everything felt right from the beginning, and then on top of that, the cultural element was like super scary and super exciting, and I think for the whole process felt, you know, safe wherever I was going. Even if I was scared, I still felt safe. You know, whether that was creatively or culturally or whatever that was. And especially, you know, in the undertaking that is this movie, that was really, I think that's like an irreplaceable experience.
I want to come to Jeff and Angela, the cinematographer and editor on the film. I mean, we're talking now cultural stuff and all this stuff, which is very important. It's why I got emotional watching the film this time. I got to be honest with you. But it's also just like it's a massive film that's also quite intimate. So Jeff, I want to talk about the visual approach to the film, working with Dan and some of the staging and things like that. You know, we were talking about the camera backstage, and then Angela, when you get what I assume is just a mountain of footage. Just the approach to slowly building out what became, I think, one of the best films that's been released last year. Just like an awesome fucking film.
Yeah, I think for Dan and I, it was really important to kind of present, you know, when we were scouting, and we shot a lot of the movie actually on First Nations lands, because it's you can see 360, it's beautiful and it's untouched, there's nothing in the way. And really kind of wanted to respect the natural environment and not present it in a sort of slick Hollywood way. Wanted to sort of really feel as real as possible, as beautiful as possible, but also as real as possible, and not feel like we were forcing things and artificiality on it. So it was really like trying to find the most beautiful things in the most natural way, and that was sort of, I think, the foundation for the photography, where we didn't want it to be anything that would pull the audience out of the film, and where you're thinking like, oh, I'm sensing this, that's a fake Hollywood movie. We want it to be, you know, as real as possible, so that the intimate stuff would not to be like dwarfed by the action. So that way you could, because ultimately it's like, if you don't care about the characters, then you're not going to care about the film. And all the big explosions and all that stuff, which is great, you know, my favorite stuff is some of the action scenes, but none of that stuff matters if you don't care. And so I think that was the sort of foundation for what we wanted the film to kind of look like. And then, you know, we just built everything from that, and, you know, tried to make it as exciting as possible, but never really trying to make anything stand out for its own sake.
Well, and Angela, for you, it's interesting hearing Jeff talk about the film that way, because as I watch it, especially watching it here with all these people, as a filmmaker, I'm feeling the room. And you guys really take your time at places to sort of progress from one stage to the next, from one set piece to the next. It's almost like, you know, Dan brings Terry Malick in just for a couple of days, you know, Terry Malick does his thing, you know, and then Dan comes back. compliment to you, my
If
friend.
you only could hear with previs what the giant step used to be saying, but it's got to be like Malikian, you know. Like, I feel like a jackass saying that word, but so yeah,
Well, and
validating.
yet,
Thank
the
you.
pace to me is perfect, just absolutely perfect. What was it like building the thing out, Angela?
Well, we did explore, I mean, Dan, from the moment I met him, I think it was clear that he's somebody that appreciates editing and the power of editing and all of the magic that you can do in the cutting room, and really like exploring all the tools that we had in our quiver, you know, to make this movie the best it could be. Not just focusing on making the action sequences kick ass. It was first and foremost about character, because as you said, nobody cares about the action if you're not interested in the character's journey. So we really wanted to work hard to develop Nadu as somebody that we understood and wanted to follow her journey. I mean, it was there in the script, but we did obviously, do some things editorially to help in that regard. But we had the big action sequences, but then we also did take our time with the more emotional and intimate scenes, because if there are times when I feel that the big action sequences can overwhelm you. It's just a wall of sound. It's frenetic pacing. There's a lot of music. There's a lot of sound design. So when we could be quiet and have those moments with just our characters in the woods, and the woods, the forest is a character in itself, which we find in this film really. Those were really important from a pacing standpoint to kind of reset us. And they also did help create tension sometimes too, those quieter moments. But when like Nadu is at the river and she's mourning her brother, those were really, really special moments. We wanted to take our time.
Alec, I want to talk to you about the creature, about this version of Predator. He's massive, but he's massive in a different way than I think I'm always thinking of the OG Predator, who was like 7'8" and shit like that. When Dan came to you and when the project became real, what was your first step in sort of building out with this? I mean, the gadgets he has are amazing. How'd you build this guy out?
Dan is a wonderful collaborator because he'll set up parameters for you to work within, and he is very much open to options and trying different things, but then he'll say certain key phrases, like for me in designing this, like as opposed to the original Predator, which I worked on, by the way. I don't know if anybody is aware of that.
There's not a lot of movies we could mention that you couldn't say, yeah, I worked on that actually. So
I'm going to rattle off my entire resume and just give me time, because there were drinks in the green room. Dan
talk about how good I was at directing.
Yeah, you want to finish? You can finish. Everything flipped for me when Dan said, I want this to feel like a horror character. And we had a conversation about it, that the first Predator was so effective because you didn't know what was under that mask. And when it was unveiled and Arnold says, "You're one ugly motherfucker," right? That was a freak fest, right, at the time. But we've become so familiar with these because we've gone down the road with a lot of different, Predator movies, most of which I've also worked on. I won't mention all of them. So the goal was to sort of create the same effect that that the viewer had when the first movie came out, without being the look of the first movie. And I said to Dan, we're going to piss off a lot of fans. And we all kind of just said, let's do it. Because the idea here is that this Predator is related to other Predators. We just sort of feel like the Predator world has a ton of diversity, so why don't we explore that? What we wanted to do was to push his technology backwards 300 years, so that he wasn't using energy weapons, for instance. He's using actual, basically
Projectiles.
Arrows, projectile. He's got some of his trademark things, like the 3, laser sights, things like that. But most of his weapons are a little more physical and brutal. And that was a blast to explore all of that stuff.
the choreography must have been so impossible to come up with. Did you guys research actual hunting styles, fighting styles of the Comanche, and then how did you blend that with the creature work that Alec did on the line?
With the choreography, the challenge, especially of her sequence, her taking down the fur trappers, was my other great love is Hong Kong action movies, and I've been dying to make I reference Jackie Chan.
The amount of Jackie Chan
which is like no one sees that. I don't
that
think,
he sent me. Just so many.
Yeah. And it was hard, and because there can't be any actual stuff from those movies in her fighting style. So it was like, how do we make it feel like it's legitimate, what she's doing feels right, but it also feel thrilling, and she's doing something that's up against impossible odds. So that sequence for me was very much about her reaction. So she's using their weapons against them. She's using their knives. When she needs one, she takes one out of someone and puts it in the other guy, and then she needs it again. We had to do it all in one shot so that we could get it all done. We'd never get all the coverage and choreography in one day. But I think we found a way that for the camera to move the way that Nadu moves. Like, it doesn't feel like a showboaty one. It's not like, oh, look at the crazy things the camera's doing, and it's but you're just barely catching the things that the camera needs to catch. And it also was made in a way that we could hide the cuts because it was a blend of lots of takes. And all of that made the sequence, I think, super special. So that when it ends with her catching that tomahawk, very challenging to find the way in which she can fight that could be specific to her and this movie, and also feel authentic and also be thrilling. Yeah.
Jane, the movie, there's a version of the movie on Hulu that you can play the entire film dubbed in Comanche from start to finish. Tell me about the process of building that, if it was the actual actors that we see on screen, or if it was.
It was. So actually, there wasn't a template for it, but there is now. And I have never worked with dubbing something in a complete language. And we kind of went back and forth, and we got an approval, towards the end, and they said, "You can do this, right?" And I said, "Of course I can." Inside, I'm like, ah! So I ran back to Oklahoma, spent a week, and we recorded guide tracks with our Comanche Nation language department, with the director there, and also with our #1 linguist, Guy Narcomi. And we recorded all the tracks because now all the actors get the choice, rather than having voice actors, recreate the roles. So if you watch it on Hulu in Comanche, you're hearing Nadu, you're hearing Tabe, you're hearing all the actors recreate their roles, which adds an extra step right into the process. So, but it was amazing because Amber's really good with language, and everybody was really committed to doing it into the Comanche language. So we recorded guide tracks, came back here, worked with Pixelogic, and put everything into the movie. But what I didn't think of was all the back stuff, like when she's walking through the camp and you see the mother brushing the hair, you see these two men talking, all of that has to be in Comanche too. So everything, even the little, the people talking. I'm surprised the dog didn't bark in Comanche, but maybe Sadi did. But it's kind of, that really set a precedence, because when we always pitch films, I've pitched plenty of projects in a native language. Everybody's like, no, people aren't what we're supposed to hear. Nobody wants to hear a native language. And our languages are dying, but they're on like a kind of a resurgence, of language speakers. So I think that just being able to do it was amazing, and having everybody recreate their roles, because now, like as a native kid when I was growing up, I never heard anything in my language. I never had people. I always thought Cher was native. I was like, yes, I want to look like Cher. She's not native. So that was really disappointing. Sorry, but I was very disappointed. So but now, this opens so many conversations, not just for Comanche people, but for language speakers and inspiring Native children and Native youth. Native people are asking their grandparents, kids are asking their grandparents, how do you say this? What did she mean when she did this? I mean, just all of these things are gestures. It just opened a whole new world for language.
Well, I think one of the cool things is you maybe wanted to dress up as Cher on Halloween. I think now.
No, every day.
Well, after the success of this film and the wonderful work that Amber did, I'm sure there are black girls, brown girls, white girls who next Halloween will be dressing up as Nora, which is as Naru, excuse me, which is pretty damn awesome. Amber, representation, it's a very loaded word, and typically the first wave of representation is a very serious piece, you know? We have to make this word that honors, you know, our ancestors in the most honorable way. We don't think of genre in that way, and yet somehow the six of you here, and I'm sure a whole bunch of people back home, found a way through genre to create one of the most beautiful, and I believe, just like worthwhile, worthy, just wholesome ways to honor our ancestors, your ancestors, the original people who populated this continent. That's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders, young lady. How do you feel having done this film, and what do you think of the journey ahead?
Well, okay, to be honest, when I did find out that this was a Predator film, my immediate reaction was to burst out into tears. Not of excitement, purely of anxiety. My manager, who is here, called me and he was like, this is a Predator movie. And I was shooting something at lunch and I just started crying. And I went to my trailer and I cried all lunch. I didn't eat. I was so hungry and I was so scared. But it's true. Very brave up there, a little more anxious down here. But no, I mean, because I think I didn't really have like a reason. I was really confused at my reaction, to be honest. And I think it was just understanding then, like, having all the pieces put together and understanding it and knowing what the possibility could be, that it could be, you know, what truly it has become for representation and for our people, you know, I mean, but then also having that at stake, you know, and having that be like, obviously it's a shared responsibility, but, you know, being an Indigenous person telling a story like this, there is, you know, you feel it in a different way. When you have skin in the game, it affects you differently. So I think I felt that all at once, but also, I mean, it was exciting, and I think it's important to have movies like this that are like genre or that are comedy or whatever else they are besides just, you know, really straight drama historical pieces, because one of the most important things about representation is that we are not a monolith. You know, it's like normally, you know, I think Native characters or Native stories are often boiled down into being either like hyper spiritual or like really stoic savage, and neither of those are correct for us now or even historically. And so to have a movie like this where we're afforded not just a look at history in a way that's more accurate, where you get to say, oh look, they had a lot of cool invention. You know, like one of our earliest conversations, and I know a lot of your conversations with Jane were about like, how did you brush your hair? How did you brush your teeth? What was the daily life like? And to be able to get to show that in a movie like this is an amazing opportunity. And also to get to have a lot of different personalities where you say like, oh, this person's a little softer, this person has this skill, these relationships are, you know, XYZ, because that's how it's always been. We've always been full people. We are still full people with our own personalities, with our own interests and you know, hearts and backgrounds, and to get to show that, not, you know, in history and in present day, I think is an incredible part of the representation of this movie, on top of having the first, you know, like Indigenous heroine ever, which has been huge for our people, you know, and what we're doing in film also.
Normally, I would, yes, please. Normally, I would conclude there, but I have to bring it to you, because this movie wouldn't be possible without you, and there's also a lot of weight on your shoulders. You mentioned the word possibility. This could have possibly gone a whole lot of different ways. It really could have, and you know what I'm talking about, and we've all seen those films. We've all gone into those films with hope and come out of them with disillusionment. Did not have an experience with this film. So man, why did you do this? No, why did you do it as thoughtfully, as carefully? Like, what you could have done it so many different ways. And you said earlier, what is a guy who won the best picture like Moonlight? Because look at all the shit you did in here. There's so many details. The simplest one, the movie opens and there's a bug and then the rat eats the bug and then the snake eats the rat, and the predator eats the snake. That is just fucking, that is the story of this world 101. Like, why did you, but then you also were thoughtful enough to empower these two women in particular. So it's like, why did you do it, bro? And I'm asking you because there are a lot of young filmmakers in the audience. There are a lot of seasoned filmmakers in the audience. And I think it's great for us to see examples of active allyship, which is what I'm placing that label on you, my friend, and making this film. But also too, if you don't hear someone explain how and why they did something, maybe it can be hard to see how you can also do it. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot, bro, but why and how did you do this?
Well,
and thank you for doing it, let me say.
Yeah, thank you for saying kind words. There's probably a million ways to answer this, and they're not as in there's a million reasons why. One was because it would be a great movie, and in that because you're seeing. I love when I see things that I've never seen before, and I'm constantly chasing that exact thing in any genre and anything. Like, well, what doesn't exist yet? And sadly, this hadn't existed yet, so certainly that's one part of the thing. The other is wanting to make a movie that does good. Even just I've had great genre experiences at movies. Some of my favorite movies just exist without any sort of message. But the thing that drives me is when there's a little bit of medicine in the ice cream, or just making something that I get to walk away with. So even not just obviously all the representation stuff that everyone's spoken to, but also for people that identify more with Amber, her character, than they would, like me, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I do not relate. Arnold Schwarzenegger is wish fulfillment. Amber is, I relate to that, and empowering for anyone who feels like they're up against it and feels like they're capable of more than what people are witnessing. And that leads to like, having it be the predator as the antagonist. There was a moment when this movie the Fox Disney acquisition happened, and the movie was maybe not going to happen. That everyone really loved the script, and my reps were like, maybe we should take this somewhere else. Maybe it's a great script. Like we could just make it a different creature. And I was like, yeah, but the thing that's so rad is that it is the predator, the thing that goes to a place looking for who is the alpha, and doesn't see her as it. And is this like the movie is better because it's that, and the Predator movie is better because it's this. Like it all just was so much more intense. The potential for an intense movie-going experience that also can empower a whole variety of people. And there were a lot of people that were super skeptical, and the movie really proves that thought that they had wrong, and now they've got a hero and a buddy.
I have to say something.
Yes, of course.
Dan is truly the actual picture of allyship. Like, going through this movie, I was terrified, right, because of all the things I said, and also, like, it was not in the hands of an Indigenous director or an Indigenous writer originally, and that is scary, to be honest. But the thing is, like, when you walk into something with somebody who is not just an incredible artist, but who is also a kind and thoughtful person, and who asks questions, and who gives everybody a voice, and who genuinely wants to learn for the film, but also just out of curiosity and out of life and history, that is the most wonderful thing that you could walk into as a filmmaker, as an actress, as a person of color, whatever it is. And that, like, I mean that with my whole heart, is like truly he is the picture of a good ally.
Wow. That's it. If you are French, you are not happy with Dan Trachtenberg. This is the cast and crew of Prey. Thank you guys very much.